Ladies and gentlemen, this is a Gaming Technical video. Let's talk about Titanfall and its performance on the Xbox One. So just recently the title was being shown off at Eurogamer Expo, and while it was on show, the folks at GameSpark, and they are a Japanese website, were speaking to a community manager at Respawn Interactive. Anyway, the GameSpark were told that the title was actually running on PCs and they were equipped with a NVIDIA GeForce GTX 770 video card, but a Xbox One controller was attached. However, and this is the part that's been causing a little bit of controversy around the forums and the internet in general, they have confirmed that the title was running at 60 frames per second. However, the Xbox One version of the game will achieve a very similar / the same performance, but however the final resolution for the Xbox One version of the title hasn't yet been confirmed. And so obviously people have been wondering how are they managing this. Now, before we go super into depth into this, let's get a little bit of background out of the way because it's very important. First thing we need to discuss is how powerful the GeForce GTX 770 is. Now, for those of you who are not too familiar with graphics cards, it's putting out about 3.2 teraflops of computing power. That's assuming that you are not increasing the clock speed and assuming it's running at the manufacturer's recommended clocks. You can, of course, buy faster GTX 770s if you pay a little bit more money, or if, for example, Asus or whomever has produced the board have decided to clock their version a little bit above the reference speeds. Regardless, you're looking at about 3.2 teraflops of computing power minimum. So people have started to question, well, okay, how is it that the Xbox One is running at, 1.32-ish teraflops, and this is running at 3.2. It's almost pretty much a third of the power, and they're still going to say they're going to be achieving 60 frames per second and stable frame rates. Well, it's very important to realize that Titanfall is actually using a modified version of the Source engine. Now, game engines, as they go, the Source is fairly old now. Generally speaking, most games are extremely GPU bound. So in other words, the graphics processor unit is what actually slows down and is not giving enough performance, especially at high resolutions. However, Source is one of those engines which is extremely CPU bound, or at the very least, very CPU dependent. And so what's a very good possibility is that they're actually not lying, as of course some people are already saying, well, that's not true. It's most likely that this is a simple case of the GPUs of the Xbox One aren't really being pushed that heavily anyway. Now, of course, Respawn have said for a long time, even early into this year, that they were aiming for 60 frames per second. So obviously they're going to choose an internal rendering resolution which guarantees a high amount of performance. The Source engine is extremely configurable, and the guys over at Respawn have definitely changed a lot of the code. However, I suspect that we're not going to be seeing an instance where developers are fudging information. They're not, doing a PR exercise for Microsoft or anything like that. I suspect they're actually giving 100% true. I think that the engine looks very impressive, but they are using an engine which is pretty old. They've made some very impressive changes to it, if I'm perfectly honest. It does look a very nice looking game. Now, of course, they're also going to be putting some work onto the clouds, especially when it comes to AI, and helping them, and I quote, build a bigger world with more physics, lots of AI, and potentially a lot more than that. Now, that could be another feature as well, of course, that's allowing them to achieve 60 frames per second, especially if you're having dedicated servers or whatever being pushed towards the cloud rather than the console needing to do it. Regardless, it does look a very impressive game. To be honest with you, however, even Half-Life 2 Lost Coast, for example, does look very good even now. Source Engine is actually one of those games, especially if you start looking at high definition texture packs, it still looks pretty damn good even now. I suspect that we're going to be seeing a fairly true to 1080p quality resolution on the Xbox One. I'm not saying it will be 1080p, it could be 900p, but I don't really think it's going to be 720, at least I'm hoping it won't be. Early versions of the game weren't as good performing, and that was of course on PC hardware, but obviously that was a lot less optimizations. Another thing as well, of course, is because it is on a console, they can much better optimize the hardware, and this has been something that we've discussed previously, particularly in the Mantle video. If you're unfamiliar with that, you can simply search Mantle on the channel. But as it turns out, Mantle is a great example of just how low-level optimizations in code can much improve performance, and some people cite 2 times better performance. So in other words, let's assume that you're doing something on a console. In theory, the console is equivalent to like 2 times better performance than if it was on a PC or very similar spec. But a lot of people now, for example AMD, have started to argue that that's no longer the case. You're getting much more parity between them as drivers improve and so on. Later versions of DirectX have also improved things such as draw calls, but they're nowhere near as good as what they should be. So hence that's one of the reasons that developers now are starting to push, or want at least, low-level access to the GPU and other features with something, for example, like Mantle. Regardless, I don't really think that we're going to be getting a situation where we won't be seeing 60 frames per second on the Xbox One. I do want to know what resolution they're targeting. I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to be 900p or 1080p, however, but obviously it's still a bit early to know. I think that the GPU on the Xbox One should be okay with this one. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of clear this up because a few people have been mentioning it to me, so just wanted to put it out there. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.